Welcome to the channel Death Zone, where we together listen again to true stories about war and the sea. Each episode is a slice of history told like a documentary, based on documents, not promoting violence, not glorifying criminals, but to better understand the price paid for human ambition. Today, Death Zone invites you to set sail to the waters of West Africa, early 18th century. A misty morning near Cape Lopez, the water surface flat, merchant ships slowly passing by, carrying gold, ivory, goods, and the futures of countless people. Few suspected that those very quiet waters would be the place closing the path of one of the most terrifying pirates of the golden age of piracy. His name was Bartholomew Roberts, but at sea people only called him by a shorter name, Black Bart. In just a few years, this man, originating from Wales, commanded heavy armed ships and captured hundreds of vessels on the Atlantic Ocean. For contemporary merchants, the name Roberts was synonymous with the risk of losing goods, losing ships, losing freedom. In our story, Black Bart is not a hero, but a gambler playing too big a game with even the empires holding power over the ocean. Behind the neat appearance and cold style on deck were decisions full of risk, the use of force, and a chain of actions that made him a target that had to be wiped out in the eyes of colonial authorities. In 1722, when Roberts anchored at Cape Lopez to rest and repair, he did not know that he had fallen into the sights of the British Royal Navy. From far beyond the horizon, a warship named HMS Swallow was silently approaching, carrying orders to permanently end the pirate career of Black Bart Roberts. What brought an ordinary sailor to become a formidable tycoon on the ocean? And why, with seasoned experience and countless escapes, did he collapse in just one morning at Cape Lopez? We invite you to join Death Zone in unraveling each layer of the story one by one, starting from the days when Roberts was still a nameless seafarer, before the name Black Bart made the whole ocean wary. After the opening at Cape Lopez, we now turn back to the time when Bartholomew Roberts was still just a nameless sailor on merchant ships of the British Empire. He was born in Wales in a poor family, in a countryside where young men often face two simple but harsh choices: stay in the fields with a struggling life, or step onto wooden ships facing storms, diseases, and accidents at sea. Roberts chose the second path. He started from the lowest jobs, scrubbing decks, pulling ropes, keeping night watch. Thanks to being literate, able to calculate sea routes, and maintaining good discipline, he was gradually promoted to the position of officer on a ship operating along the West African coast, serving major trade routes across the Atlantic. Precisely on such a trip off the coast of Ghana, Roberts's ship was attacked and seized by an organized pirate gang. That gang was led by Howell Davis. They were not a reckless, disorganized group, but a crew with weapons, with their own discipline, and accustomed to the style of doing business at sea. After seizing the ship, Davis did not eliminate all the sailors, but selected those with ability. He offered a cold but realistic choice: either join the pirate ship or be left behind on a strange coast with a bleak future. In that situation, many people, including Roberts, accepted stepping onto the new ship primarily as a way of survival. Initially, Roberts was not a loudmouth on deck. He spoke little, avoided arguments, frequently sitting by the chart table, silently redrawing coastlines, calculating wind direction and ocean currents. Gradually, his navigation skills and calmness made him the most important navigator of Davis's gang, even though outwardly he was still just an officer. Then came the day Davis fell into a trap on shore and was killed in an encounter with local authorities. The pirate ship suddenly lost its captain. Amidst noisy, hot-tempered faces, the crew had to choose a new person to continue the illegal path they had taken. What is remarkable is that they did not choose the most aggressive person, but chose Roberts, the quiet, cold-tempered man who always kept a clear head amidst storms. As soon as he took power, Roberts did not turn the ship into a chaotic place, but set out a clear set of regulations: loot shared according to a fixed ratio, drunkenness during working hours punished, disorderly conduct handled, rest hours and watch hours fixed. Compared to the scene of being beaten on many merchant ships, some sailors felt the paradox that sailing with Roberts's pirates was sometimes less lawless. But internal order did not change the nature. It was still an armed ship using force to intercept other ships, forcing people to hand over goods and ships in fear. Under Roberts's command, the voyages became increasingly bold and regular. He not only hunted solitary ships offshore, but also appeared near small harbors, forcing many ships anchored waiting for wind to pay ransom to be allowed to leave. Once, off the coast of Brazil, Roberts tracked a convoy carrying wealth for the European elite, waiting for the exact moment the formation was in disarray to close in, causing many captains to panic and negotiate. In just about 3 years, the number of ships captured by Roberts and his accomplices was said to reach hundreds, from small fishing boats and medium merchant ships to ships with relatively strong armament. His reputation spread across the Atlantic. Merchant captains whispered to each other the name Black Bart and circled on maps the sea areas to avoid. It was also that chain of activities that caused his name to be underlined in reports sent back to London, turning Roberts from a troublemaker into a priority target of the Royal Navy. From here, hunting plans began to be drawn up, paving the way for the warships that would appear in West Africa in the following parts of the story. After years of sweeping across the Atlantic and the Caribbean, Bartholomew Roberts began to realize something very clear. The more successful campaigns there were, the better protected the bustling sea routes became. Many ports in the Americas had strengthened forts, increased escort ships, and merchant convoys traveled in tighter formations. If he continued to repeat the old paths, the risk of encountering strong escort forces grew larger. Instead of trying to break walls where they had been reinforced, Roberts decided to divert to another sea area, the West African coast, where trade routes were still dense, but the defense system was not as tightly organized as in the Caribbean. West Africa in the early 18th century was a crucial link in Atlantic trade. Ships carrying cargo, carrying people forced to leave their homeland, carrying gold, ivory, goods, moved continuously between ports along the coast. It was a difficult water to navigate, many sandbars, many river mouths, erratic weather, but precisely because of that, not every large warship could easily enter deep. For a seasoned captain like Roberts, those weaknesses became advantages. He chose to appear unexpectedly near anchorage areas, using speed and recklessness to strike at solitary ships, ships waiting to load cargo before main fleets could react. At the Whydah coast, Roberts had one of his most remarkable performances. When his fleet appeared, at times many anchored ships lowered their flags, accepting to pay ransom or hand over a portion of goods in exchange for the right to leave safely. For those merchants, negotiating with pirates was sometimes a more pragmatic choice than betting all their assets on a battle for which they were not ready. Roberts exploited this psychology. He did not necessarily have to destroy ships, but only needed to use prestige, weapons, and speed to force the opponent to compromise on the sea surface. However, each time he did so, he added a line to his criminal history, causing reports sent back to Europe to grow thicker. During his operations in West Africa, Roberts did not use just one ship. He captured and renamed many different ships, building a flexible pirate fleet. At times, he held in his hand a large ship as a flagship, equipped with 30 or 40 cannons, accompanied by agile small ships used to chase or intercept. One of the most famous ships under Roberts's command was named Royal Fortune, a name that sounded like a declaration challenging even the dynasties ruling the ocean. On the deck of the Royal Fortune, Roberts organized everything in his own way. Discipline, division of loot, internal punishment, all aimed at keeping this war machine running smoothly. But that very success made the colonial empires unable to ignore him anymore. News about Roberts was no longer just fragmented lines in captains' letters, but had become thick reports, listing how he intercepted slave ships, merchant ships, light military vessels. In London, Lisbon, or Paris, people began to understand that if such a tycoon was allowed to exist too long in West Africa, the vital trade route connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas would be constantly threatened. Adding a few more cannons at a small harbor was no longer enough. There needed to be a more large-scale sweep campaign, with ships assigned the clear mission to find and wipe out Black Bart Roberts. Meanwhile, at sea, Roberts continued the rhythm of life of a pirate captain at his peak. He organized ambushes, changed ships, repaired ships, negotiated with small ports, and always tried to stay one step ahead of official information. He knew that eventually warships would be dispatched for him, but believed that with experience and recklessness, he could continue to slip through the cracks of the system. At the strategic level, authorities no longer wanted to just react passively. The British Royal Navy began deploying ships specialized in the mission of hunting pirates, not just protecting merchant convoys. Captains like Chaloner Ogle received clear orders, not just to repel, but to find and end a few leaders of the pirate movement, among whom the name Roberts was boldly underlined. When a name is repeated over and over in reports, it is no longer an incident, but becomes a target. That chain of events gradually led to Cape Lopez. After many continuous voyages, Roberts's crew was also tired. The ship needed maintenance, the hull needed scraping, ropes needed changing, cannons needed rechecking. Cape Lopez, a deep-water bay with a relatively wind-sheltered anchorage, became an ideal stopover. Here, Roberts temporarily put the ship into a resting state. Some went ashore, some stayed to clean, repair, resupply. When the ship lowered its sails, careened to expose its bottom for workers to tend to, it was also when it was most vulnerable to attack, as it could not maneuver as quickly as when underway. In those days, the atmosphere on the ship and around the bay was somewhat subjective. Some sailors, after successful raids, allowed themselves to drink more than usual. Stories about loot, about terrifying escapes were told over and over on deck, in the hold, on shore. Not everyone maintained the initial vigilance, especially when no warship silhouette was seen around. In their eyes, Cape Lopez was like a temporary rest point before returning to familiar work on the West African route. But far offshore, others were also calculating. Warships flying the British flag, equipped with heavy cannons, were tracking Roberts's trail. They investigated the ports he had visited, interrogated surviving sailors, reread the journeys of captured ships. Each small piece of information gradually assembled into a big picture, and the name Cape Lopez began to appear clearly on the map in the command room. For the Royal Navy, this was not just a strange bay in Africa, but a place where the ship bearing the defiant name Royal Fortune might very likely be anchored. When dawn rose over Cape Lopez, the water surface was as calm as every day. On the Royal Fortune, someone was still coiling ropes, someone checking cannons, someone lazily leaning on the railing watching the shore. No one knew that beyond the horizon, other masts were gradually appearing. In a few hours, the distance between a golden age of piracy and its end would be shortened to just the range of cannons. And right at Cape Lopez, every choice made before by Bartholomew Roberts, from the day he was forced to be a pirate to the moment he became a tycoon, would meet on a single morning. Dawn that day on Cape Lopez began like any other morning. The sky still streaked with gray, the sea surface flat, mist covering the sandbars, while the Royal Fortune still anchored near the shore to continue repair work. On the ship, some people got up early to clean the deck. A few still yawned after nights of staying up late, drinking alcohol and recounting exploits.
Risky, sir.
In the cabin, Bartholomew Roberts was sitting eating a simple breakfast with a few close officers. On the table was a crumpled nautical chart full of hand-drawn lines. That was the image of a tycoon who seemed to control everything: the ship, the sailors, the route, and even the waters around Cape Lopez. The first signal of change came from above. A sailor observing on the mast spotted a strange sail far offshore. Initially, it was just a small white streak rising on the horizon, unclear in shape, unclear in intent. On the Royal Fortune, many people reassured themselves that perhaps it was another merchant ship mistakenly entering their home turf, or their own ranger returning after a private hunt. The signal was transmitted down to the deck, then down to the cabin where Roberts was sitting, like normal information on a normal morning. But among those present on the ship that day, there was a man who had served in the Royal Navy, then deserted to the pirate side. When looking closely at the mast, the sails, the way the ship glided on the waves, and the flag flying at the peak, he felt a chill down his spine. Those lines did not resemble a slow merchant ship, nor did they resemble one of Roberts's auxiliary ships. He recognized the familiar shape of a British warship, most likely HMS Swallow, the ship that had appeared in rumors about a pirate hunting fleet dispatched to West Africa. When this person ran to report to the officer, and then the news was transferred to Roberts, the captain's breakfast almost stopped in place. What is remarkable is that Roberts's reaction was not panic. According to many accounts, he still maintained a calm demeanor, ordered everyone to gather, then returned to his private cabin to change clothes. But it was not the ragged clothes of a fleeing pirate, but his finest outfit. A crimson coat, neat waistcoat, hat with a red feather attached, shoes polished. Roberts did not want to appear before the enemy as a fugitive, but as a captain keeping his dignity until the last moment. When he returned to the deck, standing straight, holding a spyglass, the entire crew felt that this morning would be different. However, Roberts did not choose to recklessly rush straight at the British warship. He was still a calculator. His initial plan was to use terrain advantages and experience in shallow waters, weigh anchor very quickly, hoist sails, have the Royal Fortune hug the shore, dodging through sandbars where large warships could hardly keep up. If lucky, he could both keep distance and find an opportunity to escape from Cape Lopez, then utilize a dark night or heavy rain to disappear as he had done many times before. Sailors were ordered to pack up belongings, cease all repair activities, bring cannons to combat positions, ready to run or fight, depending on the situation. HMS Swallow, on the other side, was also not in a hurry. Captain Chaloner Ogle knew he was facing someone not ordinary. Instead of rushing into the Royal Fortune's gun range in shallow water, the Swallow kept its distance, observing how Roberts would react. On the British deck, cannons were already loaded, sailors in position, but every movement was neat and disciplined. This warship did not come to show off, but came with a specific order: end the pirate career of Bart Roberts decisively and with calculation. The chase began when the Royal Fortune unfurled all sails, trying to run along the shore in conditions of constantly changing wind and waves. The West African waters that morning were not gentle. Gusty winds, low black cloud masses signaling an unstable weather system was sweeping in. At times, the wind favored Roberts, pushing his ship faster, creating distance. At times, the wind changed direction unfavorably, causing the Royal Fortune to struggle adjusting sails, while the Swallow, heavier and more stable, still persisted in keeping course, bit by bit narrowing the gap. On the decks of both sides, people only saw the opponent's sails as gray-white streaks in the mist, sometimes near, sometimes far, sometimes obscured by short showers. The turning point appeared when the Royal Fortune entered a water area with weaker wind, almost calm. Roberts's large ship, originally relying heavily on wind power, suddenly slowed down visibly. Sails bulged less, masts vibrated slightly, speed dropped to a worrying level. The Swallow, with more favorable structure and position, gradually closed into a distance where cannons on both sides could start to talk to each other. On the Royal Fortune, Roberts understood that the moment of choice had arrived: either try to continue running in unfavorable conditions, or actively turn the bow, facing the Swallow in a direct cannon duel, hoping to use a surprise blow to weaken the opponent. Finally, Roberts decided to turn the ship. The Royal Fortune changed direction, lowered some sails so as not to be pushed too hard by the wind, trying to bring its cannon battery into a position to fire. On the deck, sailors ran along the railing, rechecking lashings, wedging cannon wheels, preparing rags, water, gunpowder. On the other side, Ogle also did not miss the opportunity. The Swallow adjusted course, letting his heavy warship glide into optimal firing range, where his cannons could unleash their power while still avoiding waters too shallow. The air was tense as a bowstring, as two wooden ships carrying the fate of hundreds of people gradually drifted closer to each other. When the distance was sufficient, the Swallow fired the first cannon volley. Explosions reverberated from the side of the British warship. The cannon battery simultaneously recoiled, pushing dense white smoke spilling onto the sea surface. The type of ammunition used was not only normal cannonballs aimed at the hull, but also grapeshot aimed at disrupting the opponent's deck. On the Royal Fortune, the first wave of bullets rained down like an invisible metal storm. The deck shook, wood splinters flew, lashings were torn, a few cannons were knocked out of position, many sailors had to duck down or were knocked over. That was the first moment of real chaos that Roberts's crew had to face since the campaign in West Africa began. In that smoke and explosion, Roberts still stood at the command position near the bow. He wanted to observe the Swallow's path, order adjustments to the firing angle for his cannons, keep the morale of his subordinates steady. But just a small mishap, a stray piece of shrapnel, could also change the situation. A shot from the Swallow caused a piece of shrapnel to fly, cutting through the space of the Royal Fortune's deck and hit Roberts. He collapsed almost immediately, having no time for long last words. For a crew too accustomed to the image of the captain standing firm on deck in all situations, seeing him suddenly disappear from sight like that was a huge mental shock. According to accounts, Roberts' sailors did exactly what he had instructed. Do not let his body fall into enemy hands. Right while the battle was still ongoing, the captain's body was brought to the ship's side and dropped into the sea, quickly disappearing into the murky water. On the deck of the Royal Fortune, there were no speeches, no rituals, only a few seconds of silence and then chaotic shouting, the shouted commands of surviving officers trying to pull everyone back to the present. A tycoon who once controlled hundreds of ships in just a moment had left the stage forever. After Roberts's death, the battle did not stop immediately. Some junior officers tried to take over command, ordering cannons to return fire, trying to adjust the ship's direction to avoid being closed in too near by the Swallow. There were cannons on the Royal Fortune still firing. There were groups of sailors still trying to hold lashings, temporarily patching holes, salvaging maneuverability. But the difference between the two sides now was not just the number of cannons or hull quality, but the ability to maintain discipline and morale after losing the leader. While the Swallow continued calculated firing volleys, on the Royal Fortune, every order transmitted was a bit weaker. Time passed, the result gradually became clear. Each cannon volley from the Swallow caused the masts, lashings, and sails of the Royal Fortune to be damaged more heavily. Roberts's large ship gradually lost controllability, no longer able to maneuver as desired, being pulled by wind and waves by inertia rather than by tactics. Finally, when a main mast was broken, sails falling onto the deck, the entire ship was almost immobile compared to the opponent. In the white smoke and smell of gunpowder, shouting sounds gradually subsided, replaced by gasping breaths, groans, and the decision to surrender of the remaining people. When the surrender flag was hoisted, the Swallow stopped firing and approached. British soldier squads prepared formation to board the Royal Fortune, seeking to control the ship, disarm, and tie up the survivors. That moment marked the complete collapse of one of the most terrifying pirate gangs on the Atlantic. More than 200 pirates were captured alive, among whom many had once believed that under Roberts's command they could continue challenging even great empires. Now, on the deck of the ship once named Royal Fortune, they were only prisoners soaked in sweat and gunpowder, waiting for a future they no longer had the right to decide. The naval Battle of Cape Lopez ended that morning, but its echoes would spread long after, through trials, reports sent back to Europe, and stories told in harbor taverns. In the next part, Death Zone will join you leaving the ship deck, stepping into the courtroom and history pages to see how Roberts's death was turned into a message by the British Empire, and why many historians consider the morning at Cape Lopez in 1722 as one of the milestones closing the golden age of piracy on the Atlantic. When the sound of cannons gradually fell silent on the waters of Cape Lopez, the story of Bartholomew Roberts did not end on the deck of the Royal Fortune, but continued in a completely different setting. Prisons, courtrooms, and reports sent back to Europe. More than 200 survivors of the battle were tied up and escorted onto British warships. They were no longer free sailors on a pirate deck, but became prisoners, sitting crowded in narrow holds amidst the smell of mold and the sound of iron chains clanking against each other with every wave. At the West African coast, colonial authorities quickly organized trials. Some defendants were those who had many times held weapons to attack merchant ships who had held command roles on pirate vessels. These people faced the heaviest sentences because in the eyes of the government, they were the backbone of an entire illegal network at sea. Others were low-ranking sailors, those who had been forced or had only participated for a short time. For them, the trial result could be forced labor, being put to work for trading companies, or being deported, depending on how the court evaluated each person's role. On the other side, the victory at Cape Lopez was quickly used as an example in official documents. The name of Chaloner Ogle appeared in reports, accompanied by praise for ending one of the most dangerous pirate gangs on the West African route. Later, he was knighted, becoming one of the few people awarded a noble title solely for the exploit of exterminating pirates. For the British Empire, this victory was not just the story of one ship beating another, but a message sent to anyone still harboring the intention of using force to challenge the trade order at sea. As for merchants, news of Roberts being wiped out spread very quickly. Many routes that previously had to be avoided for fear of pirates were now gradually reopened. Of course, piracy did not disappear completely after just one battle, but the fact that a tycoon like Black Bart was defeated made it difficult for remaining groups to gather large forces and operate openly as before. Many historians later looked back and argued that Roberts's death was one of the important milestones ending the golden age of piracy on the Atlantic, as European empires began to impose stricter control on maritime routes. Looking back at Bartholomew Roberts's journey, we see a complex picture of the era. A sailor of poor origin, entering the sea profession, being swept into an illegal path, then becoming the captain of a pirate fleet operating on a large scale. He was a criminal in the eyes of the law, a threat to merchants, but at the same time, a product of a world where profit and violence intertwined on every voyage. When he fell at Cape Lopez, not only did a human being end, but a type of business at sea was also gradually pushed back into the past. Here, Death Zone would like to close the story of the tycoon Black Bart Roberts and the naval Battle of Cape Lopez in 1722. In your opinion, was Roberts's death purely a punishment for a criminal, or was it also a mirror reflecting the contradictions, injustices, and ambitions of an entire era?
What do you think about
Please leave your
Roberts and his
opinions in the
time?
comments section.
Comment
And if you
your
want to
thoughts.
continue accompanying Death Zone and other journeys of war in the sea, do not forget to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss true, thrilling stories and many reflections behind the sound of waves and cannons.